Welcome to Next of Kin, the Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Emma. I'm a British expat living in Dubai, UAE, with my partner and baby girl. Join me on my expat motherhood journey. I'll be discussing different topics each week and we'll be joined by some wonderful guests. Now, if you're a mum, you're short on time, so let's jump right in. Hi everyone and welcome back. I have just got back from recording this week's episode with the very lovely Lisa from Lullabies, and I'm very excited to bring you this episode. Lisa is a gentle and holistic certified sleep coach. She also has years of experience as a pediatric and NICU nurse. If you need any help with your own little one's sleep, then Lisa is your lady, and she has a super useful blog on her website with plenty of helpful posts over on lullabies.ae. Oh, and also some really great free resources. Go and check that out. This was Lisa's first podcast, and you wouldn't have thought it at all. She's a pro. We could easily have chatted for another 2 hours. I still have so many questions I would love to pick her brain on. If you've listened before, you know that I am a worn-out mother and very much in need of Lisa's help, so I really had to rein myself in from turning this whole podcast into a private consultation for me. However, I did manage to squeeze in a few tips. Lisa also offers breastfeeding support, so we'll touch on that. In fact, we completely ran out of time at the end to even squeeze in the mum lemmas or the recommendation. But my plan was to ask Lisa about my previous mum lemma about the Montessori floor bed. And we managed to touch on that as we were recording anyway. Of course, I will recommend Lisa and her fabulous services as my recommendation for the week. Honestly, she's got everyone covered, so whether you want personal tailored coaching or you're just in the market for a free ebook, I'm sure she wouldn't mind. I was so intrigued on how she looks at sleep coaching and all the different elements that go into this holistic approach. So she even mentions nutrition, who goes in and out of the baby's life. Not something I'd even ever considered before, but I love this. Anyway, I won't keep you any longer. Let's jump right in. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for joining on the Next of Kin podcast today. So tell us, I like to start every podcast with an update on what we've been up to this week. And I can start by telling you that we have kind of failed at doing new things in the summer heat in Dubai, because I've realized that everything requires a dark room or it's just too noisy for a baby. So any ideas are very welcome. But I know that you have been moving. So we started the last episode with Nikki having had the movers in, and now it is your turn.
Yeah, I know. I was laughing at that because I was listening to Nikki's podcast last night, and we have literally just moved as well. I think I mentioned to you earlier, I found Benjamin's bath toys in a random wardrobe in a random room. Do not believe the movers when they say they will put everything back exactly where they found it, because they do not. So I don't really know if I'm going to be that much help with things to do this week, because my poor child has been in nursery pretty much the last week, and he's feeling it. We thought he's super, super adaptable to change, but there has been some mini temper tantrums and some quite big temper tantrums this week. But with things to do in the heat, I think it's difficult because everything's so stimulating for the little ones. My son Benjamin used to be like that. He used to hate a soft play. Now he loves a soft play. And as they get bigger, you obviously have to take them out and run them around, or they've just got all this energy that they don't know what to do with. And of course, they don't sleep. For Bonnie's age, I would actually really love Woohoo, which I'm sure you've been to on more than one occasion. I haven't been to Woohoo
yet, so maybe that's what we should do this weekend.
You absolutely should. Actually, I would. There is a play date that happens there on a Wednesday, so I would advise going on a Wednesday.
Yes, I've heard about this.
Yes.
Okay, maybe that's what we're going to do. Actually, next week we're going to be back in the UK, so when we get back, Woohoo on a Wednesday.
And Playtorium is another good one for that age group because it's got a really nice little sort of sensory bit, and kids can kind of just crawl about. Is she crawling yet?
Yeah, she's crawling.
So she can crawl about and do her own thing. It's got a completely separate toddler bit that over threes are not allowed in, which mine is now 3.5 and is almost devastated that he keeps getting chucked out of that area every time he goes back in. So I would suggest those two. Give those two a look. And of course, Kids App. Always look on Kids App.
Great. Well, Lisa is going to be full of really good advice for me this week, because Lisa is a sleep consultant and I am a sleep deprived mum. So we will get onto that at a different stage of the podcast. But for now, I really want to hear about your background firstly as a serial expat, because you've lived in Saudi, Qatar, you've lived all over, right?
I have lived all over. So obviously by the accent, the lovely dulcet Scottish tones, I grew up in Scotland. I moved to a different area of Scotland good old sunny Dundee and managed to stay there for 10 years. So I've got a bit of a hybrid accent from that. My dad lived in the States and in the Caribbean for a long time. So I've spent a lot of time in that area, and a lot of my family's in the States. So the Midwest, or the Bible Belt as it's known. I've spent quite a bit of time there, volunteered in hospitals there, because sadly I don't qualify for a nurse's license there because I'm a children's nurse.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not an adult nurse. I did actually have a job in Bermuda on that note, and was all packed ready to go, and they called me at the last minute and said, we can't license you because you're a children's nurse and not an adult nurse. Because although it's a British territory, it runs by American licensing laws.
I see.
So that was very sad. People had already planned their holidays. So I was leaving from Saudi. I worked in Saudi for 5 years. I worked on the floors as a clinical nurse. People often ask me about Saudi, actually.
Yeah, I'm really interested about Saudi.
I loved
and what it was like.
I loved it. Genuinely, I loved it. People have this concept of it, and I think a lot of that is right. There's obviously the human rights factor and things, but myself and my husband take a view of, every country has its problems, and we cannot change the entire system. But what we can do is make the people that we come in contact with, make their lives a little bit better.
What a nice view. That's a really nice view.
But we live like that. Because you cannot change a whole system.
Yeah.
I did 5 years in Saudi, and I saw things that I will never see anywhere else in terms of the conditions the babies had. Because obviously I'm a neonatal nurse, which is premature babies and babies that have difficulties at birth, so term babies as well. And I saw things, as I said, that I will never see again. I did 5 years and then decided it was time to come home. I would travel to 30 countries. It was actually 4.5 years I did. I travelled to 30 countries in that time. So I had a great time travelling, living my life, and then decided it was time to go back to the UK before it all just got... Some people think that Dubai feels a bit not like real life, but Saudi definitely feels not like real life. Because as a woman... it was great. I lived 5 minutes walk from my work. I lived in an apartment complex with all my friends. So it was like being at college, but with money. It was amazing. We travelled.
But were you really just living to work? Did you get to have much of a life outside of work?
Yes, I worked a lot. It was a 48-hour week as standard, if I remember rightly. I think Dubai's 44, which is why now with a family I've opted not to work as a nurse here. It was a 48-hour working week. But you had long weekends and you maxed out your holidays, and your rent was paid, your bills were paid, everything. All you paid for was your food and your internet. So you had lots of income, disposable income, to either save or travel. I chose to travel. And there was always, I won't go into it too much, but there was a very thriving social life that I was a big part of.
This doesn't surprise me. The people that I know who are midwives or nurses all have fabulous social lives.
Yes, I've got some great stories, probably not for air. But yeah, if anybody wants to contact me, I'll happily share them, because I lived my absolute best life in Saudi. And I did always say that I would go back to Saudi quite happily, but once I was married. With a child. Having a child was never actually on my agenda ever.
Really? That surprises me as well, because... But maybe, did it put you off in a way, seeing the sick babies, or...?
No, and I think you have to be really careful how you look at that, because as a NICU nurse, you see the sickest of babies, the very sickest, depending on where you work. And that 5 years in Saudi, when I left, I was burnt out because I saw the sickest of the sickest. It was a regional centre, so they came from all over the Middle East, and it's a world-renowned centre. And I was burnt out. So I actually opted to work in less acute care when I came back, although I did still do extra agency shifts in acute care because I just wanted to keep up my knowledge. But you only see 10% of the babies that are born. And of that 10%, only 1% are actually really sick. I mean, they're all sick, and I'm not downplaying any baby's condition, because to the parent, the baby that has some jaundice is just as sick as the baby that's on a ventilator. Their experience is their own experience. But it didn't put me off, no, in that respect. It was just never something I particularly didn't want or want. I was a bit ambivalent, to be honest.
I'm really interested to hear about being a NICU nurse, just because it's the complete opposite to what I was doing as a career. I thought it was life or death if a handbag didn't arrive on time. And if you are working in fashion, you will probably also think it's life or death. We all have to act like that. But you actually were working, keeping people alive, keeping little babies alive.
But it is life or death, whatever you work in. So how to put this politely, a lot of nurses that work in the really acute centres say they couldn't imagine going to a lesser acute centre. So maybe, you're looking after more term babies or babies that might just need a little bit of oxygen, some help with feeding. But actually, there's a real value in that work as well. And when you go into that, your stresses change, what stresses you out. So I think, especially when being a mum, and since being a mum, my whole perception has changed, your worries are just as valid as the other person. And I found this actually with friends that had babies when I was a NICU nurse. They maybe had what, as a NICU nurse, I would class as minor. But actually, it was life or death for them. And I had to remember to put my friend hat on and take my NICU nurse hat off, because your own experiences and your own perceptions are yours to have.
And did you find that because you were a nurse, and I see you as an absolute parenting oracle of everything, but surely when you became a mum, there might have been things that you thought you would have down. You were like, yeah, I've got this. And then you became a mum and you thought, this child is crazy. What's happening? Did you have that kind of experience?
So yeah, really, really embarrassingly, something happened recently which made me think about that. But I remember when Benjamin was maybe 3 months old and he was vomiting. He was projectile vomiting. He had 3 projectile vomits within about an hour, and I was a hot mess, honestly. I was on the phone to 111, if I remember it rightly, the emergency number, and I was like, I was in floods of tears, and the dispatcher obviously thought I was an absolute idiot, because he was like, is he peeing? Is he pooing? Does he have a temperature? And I had him on speakerphone, and my husband, who'd been desperately trying to reassure me, because he is the most lovely, reassuring man, but he knows me well enough by now I need to just work it out and get it out of my system. And I got off the phone and he's like, how are we feeling now? You know, he's just asked you all the questions that you would ask any other mum. And I was like, yeah, but it's so different when it's your own. Yeah. And then Benjamin vomited again. This time, I was calm. I cleaned it up. Incidentally, living in Dubai is so much better for a vomiting child than living in the UK because carpets.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had that moment, and I still like cringe a little bit at that because I was just so upset.
So, Lisa, before we get into the sleep, because I'm kind of putting that off because I feel like you're going to give me some home truths when it comes to sleep, but let's talk about breastfeeding, because you've just started offering breastfeeding support. And I feel like this is so important. I'll tell you about my journey, because everyone that's listening knows I still breastfeed my 9-month-old. And it's been fairly straightforward compared to other people's journeys. So I wanted to get her on the boob as soon as she was born, pretty much, because that's what I was told you have to do. So I beckon over the midwife and I basically asked them for permission and how to do it, because you have no idea. But by the time I had already finished that sentence, Bonnie was literally on the boob. She'd latched herself on, and we always joke that that's how it's been ever since. However, that does not mean it's been plain sailing. And so for something so natural, it's crazy that we really do need a lot of support. For me, especially, I found the pain, like no one told me it was going to hurt that much. And she is a greedy little lady. She was feeding for 7.5 hours a day at the start. So I don't know if I would have been able to carry on if I didn't have some sort of support. And when you go online, there's a lot of support out there, but it's very conflicting advice. So, for example, one of my friends, she's pregnant and she would like to breastfeed. And so I said, get yourself some nipple shields just in case. And she goes, no, Emma, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed nipple shields. And I said, but I literally couldn't have carried on breastfeeding if I didn't have nipple shields just for 2 weeks. So tell me, what kind of advice do you have to give out to these new mums?
So I think actually, Emma, if it's okay, I'm going to touch on something you said, which I find really interesting. You said almost asked permission to breastfeed. And I find that incredibly interesting, because my last job in the UK was for NHS England, and it was in quality improvement for neonatal parents, basically trying to make the experience better. But one of the things that neonatal parents say is they feel that the baby isn't their own and they feel like they need to ask permission. And I think the one thing that I would say to anybody listening, whether you're in neonatal care, whether you're breastfeeding, whether you've employed a sleep consultant, whatever you've done, that baby is yours. Even though you've just got that baby and that baby is new to you, it's an absolute learning journey, but it's still your baby. So if there's something you're uncomfortable with, you know, you have to say it because it's your baby. And the permission thing to me is really interesting, because that is a massive thing. Hospitals institutionalize people so quickly, and you don't realize it until you're out of it. And the way you said, almost ask permission, is like remembering that for you. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Well, I expected a nurse to come around and say, now change her nappy, now feed her. I didn't understand that I was just meant to suddenly be a mum and know what to do.
And it's this massive, massive transition. I mean, I've been working with babies for 20 years, which makes me feel really old. Next year, I'll have been a children's nurse for longer than I haven't, which also makes me feel really old. And I kind of just fell into it, obviously, with my baby, and my husband is super involved and super active. And he said to me, he's like, I want to know what to do. So if you go out, he was like, teach me. And I mean, he's great. I still come home. The house is still a wreck because he's a man and he focuses solely on the child.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely fine. Like I said, we moved house recently and we got Benjamin's babysitter to come round. And her focus was to be solely Benjamin, but also organise the toys. But I was like, you get done what you get done. The focus is him. So I think that would be the first thing that I would say to any new mum. That baby is yours. And if there's anything that makes you feel uncomfortable or anything you're not sure of, then speak up. The second thing is to ask for help. That's what the hospital staff are there for. And they will help. And I think as staff, we just kind of get so blasé as to what's going on and it becomes our everyday that we forget that this is this massive life-changing event in your life. And we just expect you to get on with it. Once we've done our sort of, in the NICU, which is very different than midwifery, once we've done our sort of introductory chat explaining what everything is and all the rest of it, we just kind of leave you to get on with it because it is your baby. So it's a very different thing. Breastfeeding is really interesting. And that is another thing that I actually struggled with a little bit. And that surprised people because they were like, but you've been doing this forever. And I'm like, but it's a really, really different viewpoint from the face down rather than on the other side of the boobs. It's really, really different. And it's, to me, it's second nature to help a mum breastfeed. I mean, during COVID, when we actually were allowed to meet one-on-one in a cafe, my NCT group, one of the girls I was really close with was really struggling. So we were sort of trying to surreptitiously get close so that I could help this woman who'd not managed to successfully breastfeed in a cafe with everyone staring at us because we were breaking the rules and getting really close to each other. Breastfeeding's hard. It's made out to be the most natural thing in the world. I have a NICU nurse friend of mine that has breastfed with a nipple shield the whole time. The reason they say not to use them is because of it. Transfer of milk. It can interrupt the flow of milk and it can have an effect on the milk that you produce. It can. Not always. You're a shining example of that, as is my friend, the other NICU nurse. It's really difficult, I think, though, as health professionals not to give our own experiences. And here, I've chosen not to license as a nurse, so I have to be mindful of the advice that I give. I've done my breastfeeding counsellor course and I'm studying for my lactation consultant. And what's really funny is I've got all these years of experience. I just don't have that bit of paper. And I've got all these years of experience with premature babies, but big term babies are a whole different ballgame. I went for feeding support 3 times with Benjamin and I was really lucky because I had a midwife-led centre near me. So we just popped up and that help was invaluable to actually get him feeding. We fed until a year. He self-weaned, which a lot of people are like, a lot of lactation consultants and breastfeeding people will say babies don't self-wean. In my experience, which again is my experience only, he self-weaned. He went down to morning and night, and then he went down to morning only, and then one day, literally, a week after I had my COVID vaccine, he just stopped. And I was like, oh, okay then.
This is reassuring for me to hear. Because I'm not sure Bonnie's going to be that way. She's obviously having 3 square meals a day now. She still feeds every 2 hours like a newborn and constantly through the night. So if anything, she seems to be getting more milk, not less. So I'm not sure that's going to be my experience, but we can hope.
And how do you feel about that? How do you feel about the constant breastfeeding at this point?
I would prefer if it wasn't at night time because she does not need that. Definitely, it's just a comfort thing and she just chugs as she's sleeping. So I don't think that she needs that at night at all. I mean, she hasn't needed that for a very, very long time. The rest of it, I think I will definitely miss. And I never understood why people said that they're going to be so upset when they finish breastfeeding. But I will because it's our little 2-hourly check-in and cuddle. And she's not going to come and sit and give me a cuddle like that if she isn't breastfeeding. She needs the boob to give me a cuddle. And so I definitely will miss that. But I also think from probably a year on, I need a bit more space and to be able to focus on my business for more than, say, an hour and a half at a time nipping out.
Yep. So do you want a tip?
Give me a tip. Yeah. What's your best tip?
And again, this is my experience, but it's also advice I've given to other parents, is a sippy cup. If you are trying to cut down the breastfeeding, do you express at all?
I did.
Personal question.
So I have a whole freezer drawer of breast milk because she won't take it. She won't take a bottle. She won't.
Neither would mine. We used to give a bottle at night because I combi fed, which is controversial for a NICU nurse and potential lactation consultant, assuming I passed the exam. So I combi fed. So I had an emergency section. And my milk didn't come in for 3 to 5 days. And to me, there's no prizes for not feeding your baby. People often say donor milk, but hospitals have very limited supplies of donor milk, and it's reserved for the sickest.
I would not have even known that was an option. I guess because it is reserved for the sickest, as it should be.
It's different out here because there is Islamic kind of fatwas around that.
Okay.
And there's a thing called milk sisters and milk brothers, and which is really interesting because it's a really old thing and old-fashioned. We think of it in the West as old-fashioned, but actually they've just identified about stem cells in the milk.
Really?
Okay. So actually there is science behind that, and I learned this in my lactation course, which I find the whole thing fascinating because I remember working in Saudi and one baby got another mum's milk. And it was, it's not an ideal situation in any point. And at home in the UK, that would be a massive error, which it was a massive error, but it's even bigger in the Muslim culture because they are then effectively seen as milk brothers, milk sisters, and related. So it affects their ability for future marriage, all sorts. It has to be a certain percentage of milk though. And you can still have wet nurses and things like that because the parents know about it. The difficulty with donor milk is you don't know where it's come from. So you do in the UK, there are systems, you know exactly, and there's batch numbers, but here they haven't really started that as much yet, to my knowledge. I might be wrong, but to my knowledge they haven't. But that's the reasoning behind that.
That's super interesting.
But a lot of people did say, well, donor milk, and I was like, but why? He doesn't need it, he's not sick. I just don't have my milk yet, and there's no prizes for starving your child. I put him to the breast every time, and then my husband would top him up. But at 6 weeks, he rejected the bottle, and we persevered.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So this is similar to me. I think, she was about 7 weeks. Yeah.
We persevered. John kept trying to give him the bottle each night in bed because it was my, take my makeup off. I don't know how I'm kidding. I don't take my makeup off. It was my brush my teeth, just take 5 minutes to myself every night. And he said, I feel like I'm poisoning him. He said it got to the stage where he just felt so awful trying to give him this bottle. So we stopped. So we actually introduced a sippy cup really, really early. And it's ironic because I wasn't leaving him with anyone because COVID. He was a January baby and then it was COVID in the March. But I wanted to feel the ability to be able to go places. And like that, I used my express milk. You kind of have to persevere with the sippy cup because they're not keen at first because why would they? And it would be really tricky for you to give the sippy cup. You need someone else to do it. Yeah. But you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're getting a bit of independence. She's still taking the breast milk and you're also not introducing a bottle, which I would be reluctant to do at this stage because you're only going to have to wean off of it. UK guidance is 12 months. American guidance is 18 months by weaning off any sort of teat-based product. That's the best way to put it.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that.
So I would go straight to a cup in your scenario. If she has a cup for water.
So funnily enough, when she was 4 to 6 months, we started giving her little sips of water when she weaned onto solids a bit earlier. And she would take a cup then. We taught her to use a straw, an open cup. She would always end up coughing and spluttering. So we just found it easier to give her a bottle.
Yep.
So we've gone backwards in a way. And you've kind of reminded me I need to try the cup again. And
you
try
can always go forwards. You can always go forwards. Think of it as gone sideways rather than backwards. You can always go forward. Simple, inexpensive cup. It doesn't need to be super fancy. Just give her a go with it. We had different cups. We had a red one for milk and we had a green one for water. And the reason we did that is because it's a visual cue for him. So he knew what he was getting. And also the lipids and the fats in milk adhere differently to the plastics. So I knew to clean the cups differently. Don't get me wrong, I cleaned them both very well. But I just knew to watch out a bit more for maybe stuff stuck to the cup as opposed to the water cup.
I like that idea. Actually, I'm going to get 2 different coloured cups now when we leave.
It's a great visual cue for them. They know exactly what's coming. Oh, it's milk, or oh, it's water. Okay.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's get into sleep then. Let me tell you my background and be really honest about how I am feeling about sleep at the moment. So Bonnie started off as quite a good sleeper, actually, as a baby. She's still a baby, she's 9 months old, but as a newborn baby. So by 2 months old, she was actually sleeping through the night for a good week. So I obviously told everyone that I was an expert mother and that this was probably all down to me. By 3 months old, she'd done a complete U-turn and I couldn't even get her in the cot. Now, I am a typical millennial. I have got most of my parenting advice from social media, from TikTok, and it's been really great for little tips and hacks, but the algorithm quickly realised that I probably wasn't sleeping and needed to hear from sleep consultants. And this is where I got all the differing advice. And honestly, my head just exploded at that point. Then layered on top of that, I was sent by a friend one of the really well-known sleep courses, and I was sent their 3 to 4 month booklet to go through. And this just made me feel like a complete failure.
Does it begin with a T by any chance? Is it American?
It does. And so I basically was meant to have already got her into a cot and falling asleep by herself. As a newborn, straight out of the womb, she should have been doing that. And by 3 to 4 months, I should have just been minimising her wake-ups. At that stage, I couldn't even get her into a cot. So I'm scouring this booklet, like, where does it tell me how to actually put her in the cot? Because as soon as I put her slightly away from me, she's waking up, let alone her head hitting the mattress. At that point, I think I just deleted all sleep consultants off any social media. So that's why I'm being really honest about my background here. But I think at this stage, now that I've been co-sleeping since she was 3 months old, and don't get me wrong, it really worked for us till she was probably about 8 months old, being able to just turn over and let her latch on, and then we just roll over and go back to sleep. That was great. But now I'm getting a bit worried because she's crawling. And she also wants to be latched on the whole night. She didn't do that before. So without turning this into my own personal consultation, that is my background. Tell me, what got you into sleep consulting to start with?
So interestingly, firstly, I feel like you should have come to my workship on Sunday because it was the 7-8 month age group.
Yeah, okay.
But it was full. So yeah, that's a bit of a shame that you missed that.
Well, keep me in mind because I need to go to a workshop, I'm telling you.
You tend to find the same sort of threads through it all. So even if we do relate back to your experience, there will be people out there with 6 months olds, with 10 months old that are having similar issues. So firstly, it's not an issue if it works for you to pick up on that. And it did work for you.
Yeah.
And your term, well, my term, sleep feeding. That's what she's done. And co-sleeping is a godsend for parents who need to get a bit of sleep and they've got a very sort of koala or a Velcro child, as they call them. So I am absolutely not against co-sleeping. I have actually worked with people who want to keep co-sleeping, and it's trickier. It makes it harder, I'm not going to lie, but you get there. You might not get a full night's sleep, but you maybe only get one wake up from, say, 9 or 10. I was listening to one of your podcasts as well, and I was listening to you speak about a Montessori floor bed.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that.
I am not a fan.
Okay.
I won't lie. I'm not a fan for the simple reason is, so in many ways it's great. It's great for the child's autonomy. It's great for the feelings of freedom, etc. So we don't have toys in my little one's bedroom. We do, but they're very quiet toys. They're books. They're cuddly toys. They're nice, quiet things for him. We have everything else energetic, stimulating out of the room. So Montessori floor beds, as great as they are, the main problem with them is as they get older, they have this stage where you can't reason with them. Because they don't understand yet. You can't really reason with them till they're some as early as 2.5, but I find usually in my practice around about the 3 years oldish, and even that sometimes takes a little bit of time. So basically, when they hit a regression and they are walking and they want to get out of bed, there's nothing to contain them. You literally are putting them back to bed 40 times a night. That is the only reason I don't like the Montessori floor beds. In every other way, I absolutely see their value. And if you have got a child that you are consistent putting them back in bed whenever they get up, then hopefully you'll never end up putting them in bed 20, 30 times a night. And they'll just be used to it, and that is their bed. But I tend to find if you do it with an older child, maybe with a younger child, it'll be okay. But if you go to a floor bed with an older child who doesn't have any boundaries and who can get up and down all the time, you will drive yourself insane. My husband and I tag teamed it when we would put Benj into a bed because I was like, right, it's your turn. You could hear him getting up and coming to the door and the door opening. And it passed within about 4 nights. But those 4 nights were hard. I just wanted to eat my dinner.
And I must admit, this is why I probably haven't come and spoken to you earlier, because every night I'm just sleep deprived. So the thought of you telling me that you're probably going to have 3 really bad nights, I'm just not ready. I'm not ready to not sleep any less to make it better.
But if we reframe that, because actually a huge part of my job is reframing. What you were saying about the famous course that begins with a T and the second one starts with a C, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is kind of an older fashioned view now. On how to sleep train. And I think that's why I call myself a sleep coach as opposed to a sleep trainer, because I am not training your baby to sleep. I am coaching you in getting your baby to sleep. At my workshop on Sunday, someone asked me my views on having a night nurse come round and do it for you from one of the big agency. And I was like, great, if that's what works for you, do it. I was like, I actually don't care whether you come to me or whether you go to someone else, as long as you're getting the help you need. Your mental health needs it, your relationship needs it. You do you. My one thing with that is I always worry that the child will then go back to sleeping the way they sleep when you take over after those 3 or 4 nights. I've got a good friend actually who is also a sleep coach, and she does go around and she does do that for parents. And she says it's been absolutely fine. One of the other questions, though, touching on that, is that my sort of worry that is what would happen if I did that style of sleep training, is that they then wouldn't sleep for you, is a child develops a different way of sleeping with certain people. They might go to sleep one way for dad, they might go to sleep another way. My favourite is when I get a text off a mum with their child flat out at nursery in a bright room with no white noise on, whereas at home it's pitch black, white noise, everything controlled to a T. That is my absolute favourite thing to get, because they develop a different way of sleeping with different people.
Well, that's just standard, isn't it? Like, she'll act differently with a nanny to what she'll act with you. Yeah, of course.
You're her safe space.
Yeah, we're the safety blanket, aren't we?
Yeah, you are absolutely her safe space. And I think in my practice, I very much look at the whole picture, which I think I can do having been a nurse. I focus hugely on nutrition. I focus massively on the parenting style, the child's personality, what the background's been, what the birth has been. And out here, you've got this whole other thing to take into consideration with the nannies that you don't have at home in the UK. So there is, the picture is huge. I look at the environment, I look at who else is coming and going in the child's life. I literally look at everything in this child's life and in these parents' life, because sleep coaching just isn't about sleep.
Wow, okay. And this is why you're called a gentle, holistic sleep coach, right?
So I do very gentle methods of sleep coaching, from the gentlest, which I call micro steps. And it is literally what you were talking about was, but how do I put my baby down in the cot when she's attached to me? We go from breastfeeding or bottle feeding to just holding against you and rocking, to then just holding against you, to then holding against you in a different way, and then maybe some patting and shushing, and then into the cot with patting and shushing, and then onto containment hold, and then onto hand holding, and then slowly moving out the room. So that process can take quite a while, and that minimises tears. There will still be tears. And I think any sleep coach, I'm generalising here, but any sleep coach that says there's not going to be tears, I think you have to expect some tears, because you are changing your child's method of comfort. And I think that's the important thing with gentle sleep coaching, is that it is gentle and you are there, you are meeting your child's needs. You're there comforting them, just not in the way they want you to comfort them, because that's what they've been used to.
Well, this is what I was going to ask you, because her temperament is Velcro baby, sassy diva as well, so she'll let you know that she's not happy. So there are going to be tears. Okay.
Sorry, I'd be lying to you if not. And actually, that's one of the things I pride myself on, is that I don't sugarcoat things. A few things I don't do. I don't upsell, I don't sugarcoat. I give you and recommend to you what I think you need from me, and I give quite a high level of support. I also have an app, which is quite different from a lot of sleep coaches, in that I put a lot of sleep education on there and things for you to work through, because I could just hand you a plan and tell you to get on with it. But actually, that makes you a bit reliant on me. And I aim to give parents a toolkit that they can use then for the sleep regressions. I don't like the word regression. I try to reframe that as, look at it as your baby is learning skills, and they're showing you they're progressing and learning skills because they want to practice them at 3:00 in the morning. That's what they do.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is one of the reasons why I think I want to move away from co-sleeping, because at 3:00 in the morning she will suddenly get up and start crawling, and that scares me that she's going to crawl straight out of bed.
So have you read the Lullaby Trust's Safe 7? So they have lots of guidance on safe co-sleeping and how to set it up for those stages. I love the Lullaby Trust. They're a great resource. Here I use the Lullaby Trust and I use American Academy of Pediatrics, because we're such a mixed bag of cultures. I use both because they're the big sort of sleep resources for safe sleep. I really, really value safe sleep. I think it's my nursing background, and I do nursery checks and things. And it's funny because I walk into places and there might be pictures on the wall above the cot. There might be bumpers. Almost every house I go into in Dubai has a bumper. And it's about the education. And I don't just say, don't do that. I say, okay, here's what the guidance says. This is your choice as a parent, but I'm giving you the guidance. A question I'm asked quite often is about comforters as well. And the safest place for a baby to sleep under one is in a clear, flat sleep space. It doesn't have to be a cot. You know, in the Nordic countries, it's baby boxes. Scotland also does the baby boxes. I've got a doll that I used for demoing that I threw in a drawer yesterday because we've also just moved house and I'm finding things in random places and putting things in random places. And it reminded me that that's how babies used to sleep in the olden days, in drawers. People didn't have cots. So as long as your baby's space is clear, flat, proper mattress, adheres to safety standards, then yeah, you're good to go.
You're kind of making me feel like I shouldn't sell the cot that I bought when I was pregnant. I must admit, this week I'm just seeing it and I'm thinking that's getting in the way. That's never been used. Do we just sell it? But I'm starting to feel like maybe I will get her into that cot at some point.
Absolutely your choice. You do what's best for you as a parent. You do what's best for you as a family. I always say to the families that I go in with, I am not here to tell you what to do. I am here. Think of it like when you're ill and all you want is someone to come and hand you a bowl of chicken soup and tell you it's going to be okay. And it will. We will get your child sleeping, but it has to be in a way that you are comfortable with and that matches with your parenting style and that matches with their personality. I spoke about the dandelion and the orchid yesterday. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have, and I know that she's definitely not a dandelion. She's definitely an orchid, but I think I'm the same, so it makes sense.
So I have a dandelion. I also have a unicorn child that slept through from 4.5 months whilst breastfeeding.
The dream.
And do you know, I will never know if that's because I was really neurotic is probably the only word for it, about his sleep, and I was super protective of his sleep. And I know COVID was rough and I know COVID was difficult, but the one thing it did is it really made these babies sleep well because they weren't going out. They were in the house for their routine, for their naps. Yeah. There's this generation of babies who all slept really well, but the downside of that, my child will not sleep in a car seat. He will not sleep in a buggy. He will not sleep on a plane. He did sleep on 2 of the overnight flights over, but only for 4 hours because he is so used to sleeping in a bed. Put him in any bed and he'll sleep, but it has to be a bed. So there's downsides, and whatever you do has to work with your lifestyle. I'm not a proponent.
Something I think about quite a lot, actually, because one thing that I found hard about having a baby is the balance between having a good routine for her, but being flexible enough to fit in with our lifestyle. So at the moment, I'm trying to give her that bit more of routine, but I'm having to think much more about, okay, so we've got 3 hours to get out and do something, and then let's get home because we've got to try and get her to go down for a nap and not be on us. And I find that really difficult actually to balance. And the other thing I want to ask you kind of in that vein is to do with blackout blinds and white noise, because people didn't have this back even 20, 30 years ago, and we all sleep okay. So why is it that we need this for our babies now? Or is it even something that you recommend?
So a couple of things to touch on there. The first one is the routine. I do ask if when people are doing the programme with me, if they can clear their schedule as much as they can for that couple of weeks. You would do the same in potty training, right? For the most part. But I ask if they can, just for that 2 weeks, focus on the sleep coaching. I don't advise every nap in the house because I think they have to get used to going outside. They have to get used to having a life. And for some people that works great. They're very schedule orientated. They want to be in the house. That is who I am. I'm super protective of that. But as a result, as I said, I have a child that won't sleep anywhere else. So I see both sides of the coin. I try to say if you can have, say you're on 3 naps, if you can have either your long nap in the house or you can have your 2 short naps in the house, lovely. Do what you want for the other one. Great. White noise and blackout blinds. Yes, we didn't have these things, but interestingly, my husband sleeps with earbuds. They're like a brand. Other brands are available. They're a Bose brand, and he sleeps with white noise playing in his ears each night. And I sleep with earplugs each night, which probably contributes to the fact that it's always my husband that gets up to my son. I'm like, great night's sleep. And he's like, was it? So he sleeps with white noise and my son sleeps with white noise and blackout blinds. And so we moved into the new house on Thursday night and he has been up by 6:30 every morning. And we bought the old people's curtains from them just because it's easier. And we bought their appliances just because it's easier. And there's Roman blinds in his room and I'm going to have to get the grow blind up because I cannot be doing with this 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 in the morning nonsense. So for him, I have made him this way with blackout blinds and white noise. And I actually think the reason that we have those things now, because we didn't then, is when you were younger, you were just probably dragged around on the school run if you had a sibling, or maybe you went to sleep on a neighbour's sofa because your mum had to nip out and we were all in and out of each other's houses then. Now we're not. And there's also stuff like aircon noises, and there's a lot more technology around now that make noises. So all white noise does is creates a consistent environment. It doesn't make your child sleep. It's a trigger for sleep. My child actually puts his white noise on. He goes and presses the button on his phone. I just use an old iPhone and a white noise app. I don't have anything fancy because I'm also not a proponent of spending loads of money to get things to work for. You work with what you've got, but it creates a consistent environment so that if a parent is getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, the child doesn't hear that noise because it's masked by the white noise. The blackout blinds, especially in this country, just stop the sunshine from coming in. So all it does is creates a consistent environment. So if you do use white noise and blackout blinds, you've got two options. When you're out and about in the pushchair, get a blackout blind for the pushchair, or not. Get your child to not sleep in that environment. You do what works for you. It's my job to help you do whatever works best for your family.
We're saying this about how things are different from 20, 30 years ago. However, 20, 30 years ago, they would have used the Ferber method, which is basically cry it out and leave the baby to cry. And that's how they got their babies to sleep. This is how my mum thinks that I should probably be handling things with Bonnie at the moment, right? So is that a method you would ever use?
Okay, so there's two types of cry it out in my mind. One is extinction. Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay, that is used, I think it originated in America, if I remember rightly. Basically, you shut the door at 7 p.m. and you go back in at 7 a.m. You do not go in that room. Yes, you do not go in that room, basically, unless your child is sick or needs a change in some way. And they propose that you go in, you don't make eye contact, you change the child, you change the bed, and you put the child back down and you walk out. I do not practice that method for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't sit well with me from a child psychology point of view. Two, it doesn't sit well at all with me in how I parent my child. And three, I just think the parents don't actually need my support for that.
Yeah, of course.
It's something that you put your headphones on and you get on with it. I have no judgment on the parents that do it whatsoever. It just isn't for me. And I know parents that have done that, and fine, lovely, their child sleeps great. Some kids, it does work for. Some kids, you try the more gentler methods, and it's actually too much for them. It's too much stimulation. And you can tell because every time the parent goes into comfort, it just winds the child up even more. So for some kids, it does actually work. It isn't a method that I work with, as I said, for those reasons. Mainly because they don't need my support. They don't need to pay me any money for that support. And I don't want people to waste their money. Yeah. I like to give support and I like to feel that people get value for money, which is why I have my app and all my sleep education. So the second kind of cry it out is the controlled crying. And sleep coaches do use that, and we have all sorts of different names for it. The difference between controlled crying 20 years ago and controlled crying now is you would literally go in and the no eye contact was advised, and the, don't turn any lights on ever, that was all advised, and you left your child for 10 minutes to cry. You went in, you lay them back down, you came out again. There was no comfort given at all. So there's a lot of variations on that now. The timings are a lot less. The timings are worked out with the parents rather than just by the sleep coach. And you comfort your child. For some, you sit by the cot. For others, you can go in, you can pick them up, you can calm them, you can put back down. So there is an element of crying in that method. And sleep coaches call it all sorts of different names. But that is a method that is still quite commonly used because it works. But the level of crying can be minimised or brought down by the steps that you use to comfort the child, and whether you're in the room, out the room, what you're doing. So then, of course, the length of time it takes varies. Some people are on a schedule. Some people are going on holiday in X weeks. Some people are going back to work in X weeks. Some people need this done now because they've really not wanted to do it, but actually they suddenly wake up and realise, I cannot go to work.
Yeah,
if
and
you're
for their mental
a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, anything, any job, you can be a danger in any job to people or yourself.
I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, of course.
Driving. The whole reason I am actually a sleep coach, I've mentioned that I have a unicorn baby, but the whole reason I'm a sleep coach is because, ironically, I have effectively chronic insomnia. And it comes and it goes. And I had a whole phase of about 8 months in the UK where I just felt like no one would help me at all. The doctor wouldn't help me. They don't like prescribing sleeping tablets in the UK because it's a massive thing. And actually, I had a GP friend who couldn't prescribe me because it would have been unethical. But she's like, you actually just need 2 nights of sleeping tablets just to break your cycle. I was literally not sleeping 5 nights a week. And it was when I was out one day Not my proudest parenting moment, but feeding my child a slice of pizza from a cafe in the park at like 14, 15 months. And I was like, I can't even, this is not okay. This is not how I wanted to parent. And I was driving home and I was like, I am a danger. Like a couple of minutes from home, I was like, this is not okay. This is not how I wanted to parent, and it's not safe to me, to him, to others. Called my husband. He came and rescued us, and effectively had a bit of a breakdown on the phone to the GP, who did eventually then prescribe me 2 nights of sleeping tablets, and it really helped. And I still, when I'm anxious or when I'm worrying about something, again, listening to Nikki's podcast last night brought me onto this. I still, when I'm anxious, have really sleepless nights. In fact, when I take on new clients, I get a bit anxious, and I often wake up at 3:00 in the morning because I can see if they've been on WhatsApp, I can see if the baby's slept. I get that invested in my clients. It is ridiculous. And I just think, I know what it's like to not have sleep. And it might not be because of the baby, although it was a regression that kicked mine off. It might, you might not have sleep because of your baby, you might not have sleep for something else. But if I can help you sleep, then I've done something. It was a bit like what you said in your Unmarried with a Baby podcast. You're like, if I can help just one person, then I'll take that as a win. Because that's, my husband says about me, that's my biggest flaw, and also my biggest strength, is that I just want to help people, and I always want to give more. And he's like, you'll never be rich because you just want to help people.
No, but that's the nicest strength to have, isn't it?
Bit anxious inducing sometimes, but yeah, we get there.
I can imagine. Well, we better wrap this up because, funnily enough, I have a baby who's going to need her next feed. So we're going to have to wrap this up here, but I've really loved talking to you. So thank you so much. And this is your first podcast.
It is. So thank you so much for having me, because it's honestly been a joy.
Great. Well, I hope to hear you on many more podcasts. And if you have a masterclass, you need to WhatsApp me and let me know, because I will be there. We're going back to the UK next week, so I think Bonnie's time co-sleeping is limited past then. When we come back, there seems to be no point. Tell me there's no point trying now.
My personal school of thought is wait until you come back, because her environment's changing. She's going to need you more when she's there. She's going to be even more clingy. Yeah.
Okay, that's what we're going to do. So tell the listeners where they can find you, because you've got some really great free resources that they need to go and find. For example, you've got a 0 to 3 month sleep ebook. So this is all for free on your website. So
I've got a 0 to 3 month one, which is actually a paid one, because a lot of time and effort went into that. And it covers everything. It covers sleep, it covers feeding, because I found when I was doing my research on what to write, basically, as my biggest resource, there was so much terrible advice about feeding out there. And as a NICU nurse and as someone doing their lactation consulting, some of this advice, it was solely based on the author's own personal experience. And it could really affect a mum's breastfeeding journey. And it really angered me, if I'm honest. So I was like, right, I think my book has got about 40 pages in it, and about 12 of them is about feeding. A lot of them are about self-care, giving yourself some grace, really, learning to become a mum, learning to become and grow into this new person that you are now, because you will never be the same again. And I think accept that and make it work for you. But yeah, that is a paid ebook. I've got a 0 to 3 years one with schedules in it, which is free. And I've got a travel guide, which I did at the start of the summer for those that are going away. And it just gives you some guidance on how to adjust your baby, whether to bother adjusting your baby, and stuff to do on the plane. There's lots of pictures.
I've already read this book. This is perfect.
Hopefully it was helpful. Yeah, so I do have quite a lot of free resources. My blog has got a lot of resources on it, and it points you to websites that might be useful to you. I'm on lullabies.ae, and I am also on Instagram under lullabiesdxb. I do have a Facebook support group as well. You can find all this on my Instagram under my link tree, basically.
Guys, we ran out of time. As you can tell, there was so much more we could have spoken about, but I had Bonnie at home needing a feed, typical. So we ended the podcast here. What a fabulous guest. Thanks again, Lisa. You can find her website, lullabies.ae, for all those free resources she mentions. She's easily accessible on Instagram as well, so at lullabiesdxb, where you can find links to everything, including her Facebook support group. As always, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please share with your friends. I'd love to grow our supportive community over on Instagram at nextofkin.ae. And if you want to email in, it's podcast@nextofkin.ae. Thanks for joining and have a wonderful week.